A'ja Wilson spent an entire day thinking she'd just locked up the biggest contract in WNBA history. 3 years, roughly $5 million, the supermax she'd been angling for, and made her rounds on social media telling anyone who would listen. Less than 48 hours later, Aliyah Boston and the Indiana Fever made it irrelevant. $6.3 million over 4 years using the new collective bargaining agreement's epic provision. And Caitlin Clark is next in line the moment she's eligible next year. Wilson's been the loudest voice in this league for years, complaining about everything under the sun, and now she's watching 2 players from Indiana rewrite the salary record she barely held. Why is Wilson so jealous? Let me know down in the comments below.
Indiana Fever. 3-time WNBA All-Star Aliyah Boston is signing a 4-year, $6.3 million contract extension with the franchise, giving her the richest total salary in league history to date. Zach Miller of WME Basketball tells Alexa Philippou and Kendra Andrews. Boston will make $1 million in the upcoming season and 20% of the cap from 27 to 29.
So Wilson signed her deal and immediately let the world know about it. 3 years, roughly $5 million, a supermax extension with the Las Vegas Aces, and she framed it exactly the way you'd expect, as the natural conclusion to everything she'd built. 4 MVP awards, 2 Finals MVP, and now the biggest contract in league history. For about a day, she was technically right about that last part. What Vegas didn't account for, and what Wilson probably didn't see coming either, is a specific provision buried in the new collective bargaining agreement called the EPIC provision. That stands for Exceptional Performance on Initial Contract, and it does something the old system never allowed. It lets players who are still on their rookie deals renegotiate out of those deals and into max money way earlier than before, as long as they've earned an MVP award or an All-WNBA first or second team selection within their first 3 seasons. The old system made young players wait. The EPIC provision was written specifically so they don't have to anymore.
Abby's just the rock. She's the one who keeps everybody, settled, keeps everybody calm, manages situation.
The moment she put on the Fever uniform, she has impacted this team.
The future of this Fever ball club really belongs to her, and she is going to take them to some special places.
When she catches the ball with her 2 feet in the paint like that, she is the most efficient player in the WNBA.
Aliyah Boston qualified. She earned an All-WNBA second-team selection in 2025 after her 3rd consecutive All-Star nod since going #1 overall in 2023, and the Indiana Fever front office moved the second that window opened. 4 years, $6.3 million, the biggest contract in WNBA history, signed and done before Wilson's deal had even finished making the rounds on social media. Wilson's Supermax operated under the old assumption that she'd stay at the top of the salary chart because there was no mechanism to push her off it quickly. The EPIC provision didn't exist to reward veterans who'd already cashed in. It exists for exactly the kind of player Boston is: young, already decorated, and on a franchise that's willing to commit to a long-term window rather than just patch things together year by year.
An array of moves and finishes. Her patience and read and feel for the game.
Unbelievable touch and efficiency.
She is agile and strong down low.
She's so shifty with her moves. She mixes it up. She adjusts on the fly.
Aliyah Boston, what can't she do?
Boston looking for an angle, flips it in, plus the foul.
Into Boston for the lead, she hits it.
Boston will hoist. Oh, send us into overtime.
Now look at how Boston structured that contract, because it tells you a lot about what's actually going on in Indiana. She takes $1 million in 2026, which is intentionally below what she could have demanded up front, and then climbs to 20% of the salary cap in the years that follow. That structure isn't an accident. It kept the Fever's books flexible enough to retain Kelsey Mitchell, who locked in a $1.4 million supermax of her own, and it leaves room to keep building depth around the core instead of gutting the roster to pay one player. Compare that to Wilson's situation in Vegas, where all her teammates reportedly took discounts so Wilson could land her top-of-market deal. two franchises, two completely different philosophies about how stars and money fit together.
Don't leave a penny on the table. Don't leave a cent on the floor. You take it all. You get that super max epic deal because you've earned it and you've deserved it. And then the Indiana Fever moving forward will have Aliyah Boston and they'll have Caitlin Clark up until 2029. And that gives them a 3-year runway to go back to back to back. It'll give them 3 years to make sure this whole team's put together for these two.
When the Boston signing dropped, Clark posted, "Absolutely congrats AB" on Twitter, and Boston replied with, "God is great, let's go." No long statements, no calculated PR moments, just two players who are clearly locked in on the same thing. That's the culture inside that locker room right now, and it didn't happen by accident. Wilson held the title of highest paid player in WNBA history for less than 48 hours, and the player who knocked her off that perch did it by voluntarily taking less money in year one to keep her teammates whole. That's the part that probably stings the most, because it's not just a contract record that flipped. It's a completely different set of values winning out in public. And Boston's deal isn't even the ceiling for Indiana. Clark becomes Epic eligible in 2027, and every projection points to her signing a contract that would put two Fever players at the top of the WNBA salary chart at the same time, something no franchise has pulled off before.
Everybody else is getting paid. It's time for The Reason, because that's her name, Caitlin Clark, aka The Reason. It's time for The Reason to collect as well. It's not for everybody else to just eat while she run around and take shorts. That's not what this for. Congratulations to Aliyah Boston. Well deserved. Well deserved. Happy the Indiana Fever locked her in for years to come. The dynamic duo of Caitlin Clark and Aliyah Boston is going to be a force to be reckoned with for years to come in this league.
Before the contracts, before the money records, there was an actual basketball series where Aliyah Boston walked into Vegas and physically took Wilson apart in the post, and the box scores don't fully capture how lopsided it was inside. The 2025 WNBA semifinals weren't supposed to be close. The Aces had Wilson, a full roster built for playoff runs, and home court. Indiana was missing 6 players, including Clark. So on paper, this looked like a Vegas coronation more than a real series. Boston didn't get that memo.
Only A'ja Wilson could get away with this. Look at this. And ESPN called this a highlight. You could clearly see both feet come off the ground and land again. That's illegal. And let's check this out, a double dribble. She spins, touches it with 2 hands. Like, this is first grade stuff. The refs, of course they miss it because it's A'ja Wilson. She's dribbling, touches it with 2 hands on the spin move, gathers it, and passes to a teammate. And watch this at travel. That's her pivot foot. Like, this is some Angel Reese type stuff. Like, 3 in 1 game? That's horrible.
Her approach in the paint was methodical and physical in a way Wilson genuinely couldn't handle. Boston sealed position early on every possession, caught the ball in high percentage spots, and either finished or drew contact consistently enough that Indiana should have been getting to the free throw line at a much higher rate than they did. In Game 4 specifically, Boston controlled the interior so thoroughly that she generated 13 free throw attempts on her own, which tells you exactly how much contact she was drawing when the ball came to her in the post. Wilson, for all her talent, couldn't match Boston's strength in direct matchups, and the film backed that up play after play. When Boston sealed Wilson deep and caught the ball, Wilson's options were bad. She could foul, give up position, or watch Boston go to work, and none of those outcomes helped Vegas. The interior pressure Boston created also collapsed the paint in a way that made life harder for Vegas's perimeter shooters. Because when your post defender is getting walked to her spot on every possession, the whole defensive structure starts to bend.
Anybody see in the 4th quarter, A'ja Wilson's trying out for an offensive lineman position in the NFL? And then look it, if you don't want to be pissed off, don't watch this. In overtime, a moving screen with 2 minutes left, and this is the biggest shot of the game after fouling out Boston for less.
So Boston was winning the series inside. And then you look at the free throw numbers across the full series, and they tell a completely different story from what the film supported. Vegas generated trips to the line at a rate that didn't match what was actually happening on the floor, and Steph White publicly called for an official investigation into the officiating patterns from that series. That's not something a head coach does casually. White wasn't venting to a reporter. She formally requested transparency on the officiating, and she didn't get it. Film analysts broke down Wilson's movement off the ball and counted at least 37 illegal screens across the 5 games that officials never called, and those screens weren't incidental. They created open looks and easy baskets for Aces shooters throughout the series, while Boston kept drawing contact in the post that went uncalled on the other end. That's not 1 or 2 missed calls. That's a pattern across 5 games.
And look at these moving screens. She totally destroys Lexi Hall, and guess what? They get a 3-point bucket off that play. They didn't call that an offense foul. Look at this one. Do you see how she sticks her leg out? They wonder why they get wide open layups and 3-pointers. Look at the room it makes when you set an illegal screen. That's why it's illegal. Another one, look at this. She moves over and it's just enough time for her teammate to get a 3-pointer off. Watch how she does this. She thrusts her hips at the end. Look at it. Thrust her hips to get that extra space, and she gets an open layup. Like I said, 4 offensive fouls they didn't call, and they got 10 points.
Lexi Hall was dealing with a back injury the entire series after going down in Game 1, and she kept playing, kept defending Jackie Young, and still hit 5 threes in Game 3 despite being in obvious pain. Hull was vocal about the officiating publicly, and her performance while banged up actually made the whistle disparity more visible because Indiana was clearly competing against more than just the Aces. They were shorthanded, injured, and getting the short end of the foul calls, and they still pushed Vegas to the limit. Boston outplayed Wilson in the paint across that series by any honest read of the film. The Aces survived because of their depth, their home court, and a free throw differential that Steph White felt strongly enough about to formally challenge, a challenge the league never addressed. Vegas won the series, but Boston made Wilson look like the secondary player in their individual matchup, and she did it without Clark on the floor, on the road, with a roster held together by grit and a coaching staff that refused to fold.
Well, it's hard for us to find flow when there's a foul call every 10 seconds. I mean, it just really is. And when they're at the free throw line, we can't get up and down the floor. And that's a challenge. They were much more aggressive and physical defensively. We didn't counter that with our off-ball actions or with our back cuts. So they took us out of our comfort zone. I mean, offense is about rhythm, it's about timing, it's about spacing. We allowed them to do that, and they kept us from doing it.
None of this started with the contract. Wilson's been running the same playbook since Clark's first day in the league, and every single time, it ends with Wilson looking worse than whatever she was upset about to begin with. When Clark signed with Nike before entering the WNBA, the biggest women's basketball contract in Nike history, Wilson spent a full month publicly questioning it. Not a comment or two, a whole campaign. She questioned the visibility, the marketing push, the attention Clark was pulling relative to players who'd been in the league for years. It got loud enough that the Nike deal itself became a secondary story because Wilson's reaction to it was the thing everyone kept talking about. And the irony is that all that noise just put more eyes on Clark, not fewer.
Asia Wilson is her name. Quote, "It doesn't matter what we all do as black women, we're still going to be swept underneath the rug. That's why it boils my blood when people say it's not about race, because it is."
What Wilson didn't factor in is that Nike wasn't just buying a basketball player. They were buying crossover appeal, a player whose audience stretched way beyond the people who already watched the WNBA, and the numbers backed that up almost immediately. Clark's Nike product moved fast. Wilson's shoe, the A1, has been sitting on shelves for months and still hasn't sold out. And in the sneaker business, that's a very specific kind of answer.
I kept thinking the best player in the league should have her own shoe, not just about shoes.
You think?
Yes. Right? I want to get your thoughts on that.
Because you don't need my thoughts. You already know my thoughts.
But that's how young kids, when you're a fan of LeBron, you're a fan of Asia. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
She needs her own shoe. Let me answer that. She is the two-time MVP. I'll toot her horn because she won't. Olympic gold medalist, best defensive player, 2 years running. Her team's stop.
Nike tracks how fast product moves obsessively, and they make resource decisions based on that velocity data. Clark's signature shoe hadn't even fully launched yet, and projections already had it selling out in minutes. So Nike started shifting marketing resources. More Clark campaigns, more Clark content, more Clark shelf presence, and Wilson's shoe line quietly stopped getting the same push. Nobody at Nike announced that. You could just see it happening.
So it looked like Caitlin Clark has shut down Nike headquarters in viral new footage. Now, Caitlin Clark has been dormant since the Team USA tryouts. That is until today. She made her rounds at the Nike Studios, which is the Nike headquarters.
Then Clark won Time Athlete of the Year, and Wilson's reaction to that landed badly too. Clark won it because she brought more new fans into women's basketball in a single season than the sport had seen in a very long time. And Wilson's public pushback read as frustration directed at the exact audience growth that every WNBA player benefits from financially. That's not a good look regardless of how you feel about the award. You don't complain about the rising tide when you're also a boat. The speaking fees situation followed the same pattern. Clark's profile outside basketball grew fast enough that she started commanding serious rates for appearances and keynotes. And Wilson publicly framed Clark's commercial success as something that came at established players' expense. That's not how endorsement markets work. A brand spending money on Clark isn't pulling that money away from Wilson. Those are separate budget lines, separate decisions, and separate evaluations of what each athlete brings to a partnership.
Asia Wilson is her name. Quote, "It doesn't matter what we all do as black women, we're still going to be swept underneath the rug. That's why it boils my blood when people say it's not about race, because it is."
Forbes listed Clark as one of the most powerful women in sports, and the gap between her endorsement portfolio and Wilson's keeps getting wider. Not because of media bias or league favoritism, but because brands evaluate reach. They evaluate how fans respond to a player in public moments, and they look at whether associating with that player helps or complicates their image. Wilson's month-long campaigns against Clark created a documented track record, and any marketing team spending real money on a long-term deal is absolutely doing that homework before they sign anything. Clark's Nike deal, her time recognition, her Forbes placement, her speaking fees, they're all coming from the same source. She's the most commercially attractive female athlete in the world right now, and the brands writing the biggest checks know it. Wilson keeps treating Clark's ceiling as a comment on her own floor. And every time she does, she answers the exact question those brands are trying to figure out about her, which is whether the association is worth the noise.
That's wild. That's crazy because literally nobody asked, and sources close to Asia Wilson decided to answer anyway.
Boston's contract doesn't just knock Wilson off a record she barely held. It's the first piece of a financial structure Indiana's been quietly assembling. One that's going to put two of the league's biggest contracts on the same roster simultaneously, and that's never been done before in the WNBA. Clark becomes Epic eligible in 2027, and every indicator points to her signing a deal that matches or exceeds Boston's $6.3 million. When that happens, the Indiana Fever own both of the biggest contracts in league history at the same time, on a team that already proved it can compete deep into the playoffs even while shorthanded. That's not a projection built on hype. That's a roster that pushed Vegas to the limit in 2025 without Clark for most of it, and then came back in 2026 even more dangerous.
She defends, she blocks shots. You cannot guard her one-on-one down low. She demands the double or she's going to crush you.
Boston is such a versatile big.
The playmaking of Aliyah Boston has been incredible. She's an outstanding passer.
That makes her a threat from so many different places on the floor. Oh, what a pass. Boston to Mitchell.
Turns left shoulder, put it up and in. Boston, two more.
Top shot by Aliyah Boston.
It is amazing. I think the way that the fans come out and they show out for us every single game, it's so special, and I wouldn't trade it.
Boston taking $1 million in 2026 instead of maximizing her immediate earnings is the reason all of this works financially. That deliberate gap in her first-year salary freed up enough cap space for the Fever to hand Kelsey Mitchell a $1.4 million supermax of her own, keeping their most explosive offensive player locked in rather than watching her walk somewhere else. Mitchell's value to this team isn't theoretical. She's the reason Indiana even reached the playoff semifinals in 2025, while Clark was sidelined, carrying the offense through stretches where a lesser player would have disappeared under the pressure. Lexi Hull re-signed too, and so did Sophie Cunningham. And those moves happened because Indiana's front office under Amber Cox structured the whole thing around retaining proven depth rather than chasing names. Hull's toughness throughout the 2025 playoff run, playing through a back injury while guarding Jackie Young, is exactly the kind of player you build around Boston and Clark. Cunningham brings physicality off the bench that fits how Steph White wants to play, which is fast, physical on the interior, and built on ball movement rather than isolation. That system doesn't pit Boston and Clark against each other for touches. It multiplies what both of them do.
In terms of their hype than A'ja Wilson, because of Caitlin Clark. Because let's be real, like Caitlin Clark is a like A'ja Wilson is being objectively known as the GOAT right now, and nobody was calling A'ja Wilson the GOAT before this Caitlin Clark hype.
Vegas built their model differently. Wilson's supermax sits at the center of everything the Aces do financially, and the whole structure depends on Wilson performing at her absolute ceiling every season, while the players around her accept less to make the numbers work. That model's been functional because Wilson's been genuinely great. But Boston's contract just changed what competitive means at the top of the salary chart, and Wilson's deal doesn't leave Vegas the flexibility to respond the way Indiana can. Amber Cox has positioned the Fever to absorb Clark's epic contract in 2027 without dismantling anything around her, because Boston already took the short-term discount that created the room. Two stars, both below their actual market value in the near term, both on the same team, both apparently fine with it because the roster around them is better for it. Wilson's never operated that way publicly, and Vegas's financial structure reflects that.
You had the reaction at the time, the delayed not denied post from A'ja Wilson, and then A'ja's shoe comes out and so on and so forth, and that was a big rollout, and there was speculation that Nike was worried about stepping on toes or offending anybody by launching CeCe's shoe ahead of everybody else, even though she got the big deal and is the most popular and all that, but it's coming.
Steph White's system is also built for a longer window than people are giving Indiana credit for. Pace, interior defense, ball movement, those aren't just buzzwords for how she coaches. They're the specific reasons Boston's postgame and Clark's shooting and playmaking don't step on each other. The Fever's 2026 playoff run showed that the core can go toe-to-toe with Vegas even while still developing, and Clark fully integrated into that system with a healthy roster is a different problem for the Aces than anything they've faced yet. Wilson's 3-year, $5 million supermax, the deal she announced as her financial crown, currently sits third on the all-time salary list, and Clark hasn't signed anything yet. Wilson spent years as the loudest player in the WNBA and the highest paid, and inside 1 week in 2026, both of those things stopped being true. Boston signed a bigger contract, and Clark hasn't even signed hers yet. Every complaint Wilson's made about fairness and recognition and who deserves what in this league gets answered by two Fever players who voluntarily took less money to keep their roster whole and actually won because of it. Clark hits epic eligibility in 2027, and when she signs, Indiana owns the two biggest contracts in WNBA history, and Wilson's $5 million crown sits third. Why is Wilson so jealous? Let me know down in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss out. Click the video on the screen, and we will see you in the next one.